Well, welcome to the 5th episode. It's getting quite exciting in our discussion here. Jay, you've been introducing a lot of very interesting ideas to do with the Sana manuscript, one of the earliest manuscripts, and the different layers that we have within those manuscripts, and seeing how they're very different. Writing on top of the earlier writing is very, very different. But before we get you to unpack that a little bit more and go into some details with us, Paul, I want to just turn to you because you are a writer, aren't you?
Yeah.
You've written a lot of theological books and actually are what we'd say in Quranic or Islamic terms, write tafsir, write commentaries.
Yeah, right.
But you write commentaries on the Bible and a lot of incredible history, church history, but as well as biblical and theological history and theological concepts. In your series, just tell us a little bit about it, because I have personally found it to be one of the most helpful series in understanding the Bible. You take very complex ideas and make it very simple. But you also just show us how simple it is to understand the teaching of the Bible. So just explain that a little bit more and then link it in with what we were talking about in the last episode.
Well, thanks. Yeah, well, we're book by book. That's one of the wonderful things about the Bible. Like, the longest chapter in the Bible is about the Bible, and it's Psalm 119. And what comes out over and over again, it's like how simple it is. It's easy. It's like light. It makes simple people wise. Little children can understand it. And then I love as well where it's like, you teach me, Lord. You show me things in your word. As if like the Lord's like, here, it's easy. Anyone can understand this. Children, anybody. And all the way through the Bible. And I think that's why when we began this book by book project, Richard Buse, who thought it up, and he was one of the rector at All Souls, Langham Place, had said, because he noticed sometimes people are like, oh, I couldn't handle a whole book of the Bible. It's so complicated. And he said, it actually isn't. It's quite simple to read. So we've done this thing, and there's loads of people who we've just encouraged to say, well, I'll have a go at reading a book of the Bible. And we find now all the time, if a person just does have a go and start reading it, it's so much easier because there's great stories, there's philosophy, there's songs, there's poetry, there's murder, mystery, romance. It's an amazing book of great stories.
It's life.
It's easy to understand in that sense. Even children, children read the Bible and love it, and all these children's stories and Noah's Ark and all these stories, kids love it. So we've done that and produced about 35 titles in this series over the past 20 years. But in the process, and this is what hit me when Jay was talking earlier, I write these commentary books. And then what I'll do is I'll have drafts of them. And then I'll put them together stage by stage. And I'll be like, okay, I'll have a go at this. And then I might come back to it a few days later and write some more to fill in this structure and skeleton that I've built up. But sometimes I'll want to see where I was at with an earlier version of it. So with like Word, I can do that. The software I'll use, I'll say, oh, what was that earlier version that I'd done? And then I'll just go back and it'll show me this is what you did on this date. This is what the document looked like at an earlier stage of its development. But when you were talking, it sounded almost as if with these
the palimpsest.
Yeah, it sounds almost as if you can see this was an earlier version of the document.
Yeah. So as human beings thinking through life theology ideas, writing it down, and as they learn more or decide they want to tweak what they've written before, they're writing it down, and so it is not something that's handed down from from a God.
Development.
It's
humans are saying here's a skeleton. Now let's hang a few more concepts on, a little bit about prayer, something about giving to charity, and then it builds up over time.
You can see they're creating, in fact, what we're looking at and what we're seeing is committees who are coming together to know what's going to be in this Quran. We do know that it was Abdul Malik, who is the caliph at the time of 685 up until 705.
He built the Dome of the Rock, did he not?
He's the one that built the Dome of the Rock, and that's the first Quranic material we have is on the inner ambulatories of the Dome of the Rock.
Of course, the one that challenges Jesus and his
divinity. It's all against Jesus Christ and the divinity and the Trinity and the begetting. And
so it
that's
almost
where
seems
Muhammad's
like it's a theology that's developed in reaction to Christianity to almost undermine Christianity and the Trinity.
Against the divinity of
so
Jesus.
when I know John of Damascus, who did debates in Jerusalem at that time about these issues, and it's as if I don't know if is this going too far, Jay, that it's almost in the light of those polemics that this is a Christian theologian and leader who was around at that time, and that even at that time the Quran isn't finalized.
In fact, he refers to this chapter of the camel. There's no chapter of the camel in the Quran.
Yeah, he does say that.
So he's referring to a chapter that doesn't even exist. So evidently the Quran was even different when he was attacking.
Is that chapter of the camel in any of these early 6?
We can't find it in this one. So that means there's an even earlier version that John of Damascus
or one that's disappeared. One that's disappeared.
So that when we saw that thing where you were showing us the earlier, there's even earlier ones that we haven't got at the moment.
Where are they? Where is it?
Surely somebody's got them. They would be preserved, wouldn't they?
That's why it gets even more exciting now, because now we're going to continue and we're going to go to the next step. We've talked about the nascent, and you talked about the fact that there is in some ways, your older script, you look back in Microsoft Word, this lower text was what they did not intend anybody to see.
Yeah, they didn't want anyone to see.
They washed it off thinking that this would be eradicated. Little did they know that hundreds of years later, the ink would start to bleed through.
Yeah.
And now we can see that. Now the Muslims have a dilemma, and that's why Hilali has to come up, this is nothing more than a school text. And you were almost, all you could do to keep from laughing. You heard that as an excuse. That is not, you don't let students write on something that valuable, and then you don't let it preserved. And even if you want to go and say this is a school text, where was the original text?
Yeah, because even if that student was copying, what were they copying?
And obviously whatever they were copying is not in agreement with the upper text, or in agreement with this text.
It doesn't solve the problem at all.
This is known as the Hafs text.
Right.
Now that's the first time I've introduced this in this whole episode. Yeah. This Hafs text. Who is Hafs?
Yeah.
Why is that important?
And these are the many texts that are out there are named after the author.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Here. That's true, but you're jumping ahead now.
Okay.
I'm just introducing that just to whet your appetite.
Like you said, who is Hafs? So I'm just trying to think, is this the author of this variation of the Quran?
Okay, well, you've introduced that. That's all I'm going to say here. Don't jump on me, and don't you jump ahead here, because now it's really going to get exciting. So if this is the Hafs text, then what are these?
Yeah, what are they?
None of these are Hafs.
No, because they're not the same as this.
You'd like to know who Hafs is?
Yeah, I do.
Before we do that, I want to go back.
Companion of the Prophet.
I want to go back to what we had done in an earlier episode. Let's go put this up on the screen again.
Okay.
Let's look at this manuscript. Remember, we talked about the fact that there was no diacritical marks, there was no vowelization in the earliest
and we saw it in all those examples.
And you're looking at it right now.
Just in case this is the first time someone tunes in, what's a diacritical mark?
Diacritical marks are the dots. Do you see this manuscript here? Look at this manuscript. There's no dots there, and there's no dama, there's no kasra, and there's no fatha. There you can see on the screen there. The fatha is the asa, and the dama is the usha, and the kasra is the e. There are only 3 vowels.
And they're lines or sort of symbols above the
fatha is it's just a line above. Below. The dama is a little squirty Q above. The kasra is a little line below. Okay, so the 3 vowels are missing. This manuscript, here's another manuscript. This is the Sana'a manuscript that we've been talking about earlier. That has none of these dots. Here you can see another one. This is the Topkapi that we've been looking at all in the previous episode. It has no dots. It has no vowelization. Here's a Shiite one. From Ali, it has no dots, it has no diacritic. Why is that important?
Now you're zooming through because we've already done this.
We've already done this.
Episode.
That's why I'm just reviewing what we already did. Because there are 28 letters in the Arab alphabet. Here are the 6 that are unique, that don't need any dots.
Yeah.
The other 22 need dots. Yes. Why? Because if you don't have a dot, let's just take that smiley face. Yeah. 1 dot above it makes it a na, 2 dot makes it a ta, 3 dots makes it a tha, 1 dot below it makes it a ba, and then another 3rd dot makes it a ya. So, na, ta, tha, ba, ya. You get 5 different letters out of just 1 smiley face. Yeah. If you have 3 smiley faces together, you can get 19 different words. Okay?
So you have to have the dots.
You have to have the dots.
To be able to read, to know what the letters are.
What? Yeah. Since there's such a multiplicity, if you get 19 words just out of 3 smiley faces, then and there are 28 letters you're dealing with, and 22 of them need these dots. You can have all kinds of variations.
Yeah, it's huge.
So you can see there is a problem here, because even when the dots were then created, you're going to have to ask, well, how then do you read the Quran?
Yeah.
Who then has the authority to do so?
Yeah.
Well, this is what happened in the 9th century. In the 9th century then, and there was a number of students who decided that they were going to, and I'm going to ask you to go up to the slide here. Take a look at this slide here, and take a look at the names on the right side there. You can see these names. Al-Bazi, if you look there, Kubi, you see Warsh, and Kalun, Hisham. But what's fascinating, these are all from the 9th and 10th century, late 8th, early 9th and 10th century, these names. These are students that are coming from 5 cities. From Medina, from Mecca, from Damascus, Kufa, and Basra. Those are the 5 cities that these students come from. So those are the 5 major cities where these schools were actually perfecting as to how the Quran was going to be read.
So there are different schools and different locations coming up with different Qurans.
They're coming up with the students. These are nothing. Now remember, Hafs is one of these students. But I want to just go look at the slide again. Look at the slide, and I want you to go through with me as I put up their different references. If you look at, let's go back again. And let's go back to this page here. I want you to look at this page here. And I'm going to put up each one as they go up. Al-Susi, Ala ibn Khalid. You continue on to Khalaf, Al-Ashar, Abi Jafar, Warsh, Al-Azraq, Duri, Al-Bazi. Can you see, after it gets boring?
Yeah.
These are just 26 different students that we have been able to buy today. Every one of these you can buy.
So they're Arabic Qurans that have been bought in different cities around the Muslim world.
In fact, these were all bought by Hatum Tash, who is on our team, founder team. And while she was there, she asked people to go to Morocco, to go to Yemen.
This is even today.
Yeah.
This
So
was just
many
a few years ago.
different
Just a few years ago.
and buy these Qurans.
She went to the marketplaces in Jordan, in Yemen, and Morocco. Those
had
3
friends
countries.
do so, yeah.
Had friends go and buy them, and she came up with 26 of them. Now we're up to 31. But these were just a picture of the 26.
But they're all the same.
Not one of them's the same.
What?
Not one of them is the same. And you go back, when you look at these, if you look at here, every one of them come from one of these students that's on the right side, on the slide that we have up there.
From the 10th century.
From the 8th, 9th, and 10th century.
Because, is this just a silly question, but it seems to me that if, without the dots, there's such variety of possible meanings, why didn't, you would need Muhammad to have done this.
Okay, hold on a minute. Stop.
Surely.
Okay, don't get to, you're jumping ahead. We're going to come back to that.
Okay.
But before we do that, let's still explain what we're talking about.
Yeah,
because we haven't explained what we're talking about yet. So every one of these students came up with hundreds, did I say hundreds? Thousands of differences.
Wow.
What?
Look at those brown areas.
So they didn't all arrive at the same conclusions?
Well, let me look at, before I go any farther, can you see this black circle?
Yes.
Who's it around? What's his name?
That's the guy you were talking about.
That's the Hafs.
Yeah.
That's the one that has been chosen for today.
Why that one, though?
Very good. Interesting question, because no one has an answer to that. He's from Kufa. He's not even from Arabia. He's not from Medina. He's not from Mecca. He's from what is today Iraq, south of Baghdad.
Well, that seems an unusual choice, given that. Surely you would pick someone from Mecca or Medina.
Hold on, we're going to get to that in the next episode.
Okay.
Just for right now, this is the one that has been chosen for today.
That's the one that was chosen.
Right. I'm going to tell you the date when that was chosen.
But why? Okay, go on.
Yeah. Should we tell them the date now, Beth?
Sure, go ahead.
The date that was chosen, 1924.
What the? No! I thought you were going to go like 710 or something.
1924.
What? 1920? What? So before 1924, there wasn't even a one version.
They can't find any Quran before 1924 that agrees with the Quran they use today.
No,
they don't
that
know
can't
the
be
text.
right.
They don't know the text
I want
from
you to look
which
again.
that
Look at that slide
1924
again.
Quran comes
Let's
from.
look at that slide again. When did he die? 796. When did Muhammad die? 632.
32.
We're talking about 120 years after. Finally, you get a guy that writes this Quran. 120 years, he never knew Muhammad. He was never even the same century as Muhammad. He was at the end of the next century, he writes this text, but take a look at the other ones up there. Look at Al-Bazi. There's 1,094 differences between his text and Hafs' text. Look at Qalum, 1,700 differences. Hirsham, 1,300 differences. Look at Khalaf, 2,600 differences. Look at Khalid. He has 601. Take a look at Abdul al-Harith, 5,000 differences.
5,000.
Here, look at this. See Al-Duri up there in Kufa?
Yeah.
He had about 336 differences, and then he moves to Basra and rewrites it again, and now he has 4,600 differences. The same man.
So he's
doing that.
He's actually contradicting himself.
The editorial process. It's the Word document thing. Yes. Even one guy.
Now, as we're saying right now, we all have a whole bunch of scholars who are looking at this and looking at these differences. Just by looking at 23 of these, we've only looked at 23 so far. Just what we have found already, we have now 59,776 differences between them.
Wow.
59, that's almost 60,000 differences.
But this is huge, and these are not just a different way of spelling,
no,
or a different number. It really is actual different words, even whole segments missed out by different Qurans.
Let's look at some examples.
Can I just clarify though? You're saying that this is formulated in the 20th century.
The Quran, yes.
Yeah. I just can't believe, because
95 years ago.
When I'm dealing with this,
It gets worse than that.
It can't be, because when I'm dealing with this, we're nailing things down to, like, you know, second century, third century, things like that. This is 20.
Yeah.
No, it was 1924 only in the city of Cairo.
What?
Hold
So
on.
there's another
I don't want to say
there's
any more than
another
that right
text
now.
coming later.
Okay,
It's going to get worse.
this can't. This
Hold
is
on a minute.
impossible.
So let's now look at some of these differences. Now,
Okay.
now for those Muslims who are watching, what we're talking about is qira'at and ahruf. Let me repeat that. These are known as qira'at and ahruf. Anytime you say that the Quran has been changed, this is what they think you're talking
Right,
about.
okay.
And what they will say is, but there's no differences. And they always start with chapter 1, verse 4. Surah 1, verse 4. Look up on the slide and let's look at Surah 1, ayah 4.
I've actually heard Muslim missionaries use this verse with me.
This very one.
When you raise this
Yes.
particular question, which is a legitimate question, this is the verse that they'll often go to.
To explain.
Yeah,
it.
to show
Just
it's
like,
not,
this
it's
is
just
why-
not much of a difference.
Mr. Smith, you don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, so this is the explanation.
And
right?
and on the left side is the hafs, which is the one that we use today.
Yes.
It says Maliki. The Warsh one on the right is the Warsh, which is used all over North Africa, and that's Maliki. Now, one is the only owner, the other is the king.
Right.
So the only owner of the day of recompense versus the king of the day of recompense.
And the idea
Mr.
is
Smith,
kings
a king is the
are
owner.
owners.
Yeah.
So there's no difference here, Mr.
That's
Smith.
fine. No one's going to have a real
And
problem
this is the
with that.
only
There's
one
no
you will.
problem.
This is the only one you'll see on YouTube.
Although that be said,
Yeah.
it's not that big of an issue really, and I don't have an issue with it, except that the Quran is supposed to be
Oh, yeah.
absolutely
It's
perfect,
yeah.
unchanged.
Well, to come back
So
on that,
is
which
an
one of these
issue.
is in heaven?
Oh, yeah, all right then. Which of those two? But nevertheless,
Yeah,
if
which
that's-
is on the
if that's
prescribed
the
tablets.
only kind of variation.
Now,
we're
the comeback,
talking about,
Muslims will
I
say,
could live with that.
the one in heaven doesn't have any diacritical marks, nor does it have the dagara, the aleph, to
okay.
make a difference. Because this has an aleph, this one doesn't have
So
an aleph.
Some people listening won't know what alephs are.
The ah sound.
Okay then.
The
So
ah sound.
basically, if this is the kind of variance we're looking at, then it's not a big problem, is it, Jay?
If it was just
yeah,
that.
if it's just this, we could. That's okay, isn't
Yeah.
it? All right.
Let's look at this one here. This is chapter 2, verse 10. I could go to 60,000 of it. I'm just going to show you one or two here.
This is the so they're not all like that one that you just showed me.
We need to go and look at some other ones,
Let
right?
me see one.
Here's
okay,
one.
then.
On the Hafs, it's yaksibuna. In the Warsh is yukazibuna. So the translation, in their hearts is a disease, and Allah increases their disease. A painful doom is theirs because they lie in the Hafs. And the other one is, a painful doom is theirs because they cause others to lie.
Oh, that's
quite
different now. That is different.
So do they lie or do they cause others to
I have had people
lie?
say that's not a big difference, but
No,
it
no,
may
that
be
is
not
now.
understanding
Yeah.
that actually that's it.
That is starting
Here's
to
another
be
one.
that- that's-
Either you're the
yeah.
liar or someone else
Yeah.
is the liar. That's quite different.
That is
Here's
different.
chapter 2, verse 271. On the Hafs, it's yukafiru, or is it nukafiru? So is it, and he will remove or expiate for you some of your misdeeds, or is, and we will remove, expiate?
See, that now is a big theological
There's
difference.
in fact, you could do a
That's
doctorate just on that last verse.
Yeah, I bet people would if that was in the Bible.
Yes,
There would have
yeah.
several people would have done PhDs.
I would have
on
a
that.
huge issue
Yeah.
if it's God speaking
Yeah.
versus just a human being
Or
speaking. I
is
have a
God
huge issue with
singular or
that.
is God plural?
Oh,
See, can you see? You
Yeah.
can even bring that in.
Yeah.
Who
Could
is
even
the we
bring that.
then?
Is it we the
It's
Trinity?
Allah. It's
Yeah.
Allah, the Trinity. Of
Yeah.
course, we do know the Quran uses
Because it
we
has to be
quite a lot,
God who's
but-
speaking. Only He can expiate the sin,
surely.
right? But who is He? Is He singular or is He plural?
You see that that's a huge one.
Yes, I mean
Can
that
you see-
implies if that's Allah, that means Allah is a Trinity.
See,
Which would be an issue.
these sort of changes would, are huge things.
Here's another
Yeah.
one. Here's
All
one
right.
I like. This is one of my favorites.
I've heard this verse before, and I really had someone absolutely convinced that there was no problem with this variation when I raised it with a Muslim friend. They just really were adamant. Oh, it's not a big deal. That's not a big issue. It's a huge issue.
It is.
Jay, go ahead and read it.
Here's the Surah 3, Ayah 146. And how many a prophet fought with whom were many worshippers of the Lord? And that's qatala. In the Warsh, which is the second most popular one, it says, and how many prophets were killed with whom were many worshippers of the Lord?
Yeah, that's really
Qutila.
different.
It's completely different
Fighting,
vowelizations.
Being killed, yeah.
Completely different vowelizations. Significance, did the prophet simply fight or were being killed? If I were a prophet, I would rather fight than be killed. As a former survive.
Yeah.
So that's hugely significant for me as a
That's
prophet.
very
I would like to know what's the difference. So you can see that has a huge significance. We're going to go through some other ones. Here's another one that I want to... this is chapter 7, verse 57. Al-Riya Bushra. I'm sorry for those of you who speak Arabic as a mother tongue. I'm desecrating it as an American. On the other side, it's Al-Riya Nashra, not Bushra, but Nashra. So one is, and he it is who sends forth the winds, bearing good news before the mercy until when they bring up the laden cloud. Or is it, and he it is who sends forth the wind as scatterers. So does the wind bear good news, or does it scatter rain clouds?
Yeah, that's quite a different idea.
Completely different idea, completely different theological concept, because you'd like to know the difference there. I'm going to go to another one that's probably much more exciting. And this is fascinating. In this Hafs, it has chapter 18, verse 36, Minha, and I think not the hour will ever, and I think not that the hour will ever come, and if indeed I am brought back to my Lord on the day of resurrection, I surely shall find better than this when I return, has now been changed to in the waters. I surely shall find better than both of them when I return to him. So will the companion find a better place, or a place better than the other two?
I know.
And who are these other twos?
Yeah, who are the other?
It doesn't even make sense in the context.
And you can see that is a quite big variant of text. That
It's a huge variance of text. There's some.
And what's interesting, Jay, is like, okay, so we're actually showing differences between the actual verses, but when you do a comparison, there's even some verses completely missing from the different
No,
texts.
surely there's not missing.
Or is that
verses.
just in the?
That's just wait, hold on.
That's
That's
coming, okay.
Oh, that's
coming.
even coming.
Okay.
But like the problem with this is like this would be difficult enough. But if you are tied to the belief that this
Yes.
book has absolutely no change or variation and has just come straight down from heaven, I think this must be quite of a trauma to see this.
Well, let's look. Here's this starts getting worse.
Can I just give a testimonial to that? There was a Muslim missionary, he's brand new to the country, just come in from Pakistan, and he came up to me and was talking about the perfect Quran.
Yeah.
I happened to, it's the only time I've ever had the top cuppa in my actual bag, because I was showing
That's
it to some
unusual.
people. Yeah, I don't normally walk around with it, because it's it's a book actually you can't find in many places. Anyway, he was saying we have the perfect Quran, and he'd come to Britain, just arrived in Britain, to be a missionary here in Britain to bring British people to Islam. As we were talking, he was talking about this perfect Quran. I just opened it. I said, look, this is done by 2 Muslim scholars. Let's open it and you read for yourself and look at the Arabic for yourself. And let's look that this is not a perfect Quran, and look at how they show it isn't the same as we have today. And I opened it up and he began to do some of the comparisons, began to read it, and his eyes filled up with tears and he began to cry. And I said to him, I'm sorry that. I said, I'm sorry that this is so difficult. But the fact is that if you are claiming that your book is perfect and from God, you have to be able to prove it. But more importantly, you're making a claim you can't support. And it means that there has been human hands on this book that has written this book. And it's not this perfect Quran from Allah. And that means you've got to then start asking big questions of the Quran. Where do you even follow the truth? And I said to him, I tell you this because I care for your destiny, where your ultimate destiny is going to be. And if the Quran is not from God, one, who is it from ultimately? Second of all, is it actually leading you away from God? And that's why we're even looking at this. This is why we are challenging the Quran. It matters so much because it leads us away from God.
Because this is obviously human.
Well, the other thing is, this is only an argument. The idea of the immutability is really from the non-Arab world. This is coming from the Asian subcontinent. This is coming from Pakistanis, Bangladesh, and the Indians. The Arabs don't have a problem with this. I want you to open that book right there. This is what you can get. You can buy this all over the Arab world. This has been printed today. Hold that up.
All over the Arab world.
Take a look. These are, and let's just go bump that. These are actually 10 of these variants right here on the bottom. So here's a typical, it's all in Arabic. Here is, every time you see a green mark, that's a variant.
So there's just loads of variants right there.
These are all diacritical variants. These are all differences in the way they put the dhamma, the kasra, and fatha, and also the diacritical mark. And they even show how the variants are in different colors. So in the Arab world, they don't even have a problem with this because they don't make the claim.
It's true.
They just know the Quran has lots of variants, has lots of ways of reading, lots of readings. Okay, that's what they're saying. So this is nothing new to the Arab speakers. It's only, but see, the Arab speakers only make up 15% of all Muslims. And they are not even arguing this because they have no one to argue this with. It's not important to them.
Yeah, I see.
It's the English speakers. It's the Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, and also the Indians who make up 600 million who are making this argument that the Quran has never changed. There's not one dot Not one diacritical mark, not one vowelization.
But doesn't the Quran itself sort of make these claims about itself?
The Quran doesn't say this. That doesn't say
not
that.
in that extreme
because
way.
There was no diacritical marks when the Quran was written.
Yeah,
so that's not even there. This is what we call a textual criticism.
Yeah.
We're looking at textual criticism. But you can see already in the 8th and 9th century,
there's no question.
they had such a problem with this. They didn't know how to put the dots in. There was so much disagreement. We've already come up with 31. There should be about 37 that we're going to finally find. There are about 37 out there that we know of from 5 different cities. So this
37 different varied Arabic Qurans that exist today.
Different students who have different Qurans. It could be, we might even find even more than that. But we've already found, we have now here in London 31 of them.
Almost 40.
Hattush is the one that has all of them. But what we're going to do is, I just wanted to end off, before we go any further, I just want to end off with a few more examples to show Muslims that this does change the text. Here you have Surah 38, Ayah 45, Ibadana, which has a Dagar Alif. Now many Muslims say the Dagar Alif doesn't change a thing. And this is what we're getting at Speaker's Corner. Mansour Ahmad all the time says, these are nothing more than Dagar Alifs, which is a later form of an Aleph. It's a elongated form of Aleph that was introduced, which is true, it was introduced, but let's see what happens when you bring the Dagar Aleph. With the Dagar Aleph, it says, and remember our slaves, Abraham, Isaac, and Yaqub, the owners. When you do Abdana, no Dagar Aleph, it says, and remember our slave, Abraham, Isaac, and Yaqub. Can you see a difficulty there?
Yeah.
Not only does it disagree as far as the listed slaves, who when Al-Bazi does it without the Dagar Aleph, which is the earlier form, he doesn't know how to count. Because how can you have the slave then referring to 3 of them?
Yeah, that's obviously wrong.
So you can see the Dagar...
So it's just a human error.
So
really.
the Dagar Aleph had to be improved,
had
to be put into there. Had
Jay,
to be put into as a result.
Thank you for these. I just wondered if you could just sort of summarize some of the main points about this. So you've shown us some really helpful differences. Just summarize quickly some of the main points that you want to draw out of this and what we need to, out of what you've shown us.
Okay, what we're looking at is nothing more than Qira'at and Ahruf.
Explain what that is again.
These are the readings. And when Muslims say that, that when this Quran had to be rewritten again at the time of Uthman, getting back to your point, that these were nothing more than 7 readings, 7 Ahruf.
Right.
The difficulty is, every one of these required diacritical marks.
Yeah.
There were no diacritical marks at the time of Uthman, right?
There
were no
could be
vowelization.
no variations.
So this had nothing to do with Qira'at.
It can't be that.
And look at the dates again. Remember what the dates are. They only begin in the late 870s. 796 is when Hafs was finally died. So this had to be late 8th century. That's when this became important. Late 8th, 9th, and 10th century, when all these different students. So this whole idea that the Qira'at and Ahruf is all that we're talking about, first of all, doesn't make sense for the 7th century. And more than that, even if you do hypothetically say that there were, let's say that they find a Quran that's from the 7th century that does have diacritical marks. Even with that, so just take a look at how it changes it.
Yeah, it does.
So obviously what we're saying is the Qira'at, and the Ahruf are damaging it enough, but I don't really care.
Yeah.
Really, the Qira'at and Ahruf is not really a big argument. Because the Qira'at and Ahruf are just saying this is man who has disagreements. These are a group of men, about 37 who have different agreement as to which is the meaning of the word. And we see the word, it changes the meaning quite substantially.
Yeah. Yes.
In fact, it changes the theology in many cases.
Yeah.
So I would like to know that, especially if I'm a prophet, whether I die or at least I fight. Things like that, something as simple as that. I'd like to know if God is we or is he. I'd like to know whether he's plural or singular.
That's very important.
These are hugely significant for me because I'm pretty much going to say that this seems to suggest that they did have a view of a triune God.
Yeah.
Possibly early, but then that got eradicated with the Hafs manuscript.
Yes.
From we went to ha, to he. So if that were the case, I would still like to dive into, but this is still not that damaging because all we're saying this is man has manipulated this, man has created it at a later date. These are disputes and nothing more than that. Well, the question is then why is it that Hafs seems to know what no one else knows?
Yeah.
And who chose Hafs?
Yeah. What's that about?
I'm not going to tell you now. You're going to have to hold. Those of you who are listening, you're going to have to see who chose Hafs. Who chose this man that died in 796? But before we even get into that, there's still one more area that's even more devastating. This is stuff that's really going to...
More devastating
than this.
Every time you say this, Jay, I think it can't be worse than this.
It gets worse than this.
It gets worse.
Because now we're going to go in the next segment, we're going to look at Dan Brubaker's material. Dr. Dan Brubaker. And his material I first introduced in 2014, 5 years ago in a debate I did in Toronto. And that caused so much problem for Dr. Shabirali that all he could do is respond, well, I don't really care if you do find these, what I'm going to explain next segment. I know that it has to be the Word of God because of the number 19.
Oh, yes. I remember that.
Hold on to that, the number 19.
Okay, that sounds
That was
incredible.
his only comeback.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. I suppose what's interesting to me at the end of that is 25 years ago or more, when we were debating, and all the time back then, I spent a lot of time explaining all the criticisms of the Bible and the manuscripts, and I was doing all this research saying, okay, and then the sort of things that were being thrown at me were really quite small, detailed things, but I was having to do all this homework to look at all the study of the Bible. I didn't have any of this stuff. Any of these ones that you've shown us would have been devastating back in the 90s.
Much worse than anything that we're talking about the Bible.
Yeah.
And we would never make the claims about the Bible that we make about the Quran.
That wasn't the focus at all.
We've said this over and over again. We don't talk about eternality.
No.
We're not even talking about...
This is a human document. The Bible says it is.
But it also shows who God is. I mean, just to wrap up, like the Bible says it's written through the hands of human beings because God has always communicated and written through the hands of human beings because God himself has come as a human being. God has always walked with human beings from the very first chapters of the Bible of Genesis right through to Revelation. So actually the way we view the revelation in the Bible is a reflection of who God is and how he intimately interacts with and works and walks with human beings, whilst Islam is very, very different, where it has a distant God who doesn't interact with them, and yet their book seems very man-made and very human. So it's a whole different view, and we can't even really equate the two. We can't compare the two. Well, hold on to that thought and hold on to the number 19 and all those very interesting little differences. We're going to look at even more information in the next episode, and we'll see you there. Bye-bye.